Hello everyone, we are here in a beautiful tax haven, one of the ones that you may have heard of. It's fairly well known, and it's actually, I would say, of increasing popularity. One of the things that I'm really interested in is kind of finding the hidden gems, talking about what it is that places that are upcoming might be, where the opportunities are that you might not be aware of yet, and exploring them. So here we are today in beautiful Cayman Islands, or Cayman Islands. I'm probably mispronouncing it slightly, but anyway, there's a certain way they pronounce it. And so for those of you who are not familiar, this is an island in the Caribbean. It's quite small. I'm on Grand Cayman at the moment. There is actually a few different islands, but this is by far the most populous and the main one that people come to. And it is a place that I have a variety of clients who have come to, and I have a few clients who have also purchased property here and kind of established themselves here. And so, first of all, I have good friends who live here, and we're doing a variety of different business in this area. So I wanted to come down and visit some of the different service providers, meet some people, etc. And I figured at the same time I would go through and explain to you guys a little bit about what it is like. I'll do a few videos talking a little about what the residency process is like, how things are tax-wise, how things are lifestyle-wise, etc. So that you've got a little bit of an overview. But I think it's a place that most people would not put on their radar, and it probably should be on more people's radar than it actually is. So let's go through it quickly. So first of all, no personal income tax, no corporate income tax. There is import duty, and in fact, as I entered the country, even though I didn't declare anything, I'm not leaving anything here, etc., they still wanted to search my bags, fair enough. But that is kind of how they finance things around here, is really on the import duties, which is, perfectly reasonable. It is pretty much warm all year round. There is hurricane season. Technically speaking, I think they say it's like June to November, but realistically, there's a fairly short period of time where there's actually like serious hurricane stuff, and you kind of know it's coming in advance. I had dinner last night with some service providers, and I was talking to them a little bit about it, and they mentioned that, yeah, unlike other natural disasters, you know in advance when a hurricane is coming, and as a result, you can prepare accordingly. It's also true that around here, everything's kind of built to be hurricane-proof because they kind of know that that is the case. The last, really, I think, destructive hurricane in the region was Hurricane Ivan, which was about 20 years ago, something like that. And there is actually a hotel that was damaged there that to this day has not been repaired. I'm not exactly sure what's going on in that regard. But as far as these islands go, I think it stands out. So it's first of all the wealthiest of the Caribbean nations. The one that maybe would be, you can kind of throw, okay, St. Bart's, which I've done a video on previously, is part of France and is fairly well off. There's another one, Antilles, places like Aruba or Sabonaire. These are places that are, a little bit, they're Dutch, right? So things tend to be a little bit more organized, etc., than you would get in some of the other islands like maybe St. Lucia or Dominica or Dominican Republic or etc. And then of course not technically Caribbean, but kind of fits in the halo of that is Bermuda. I will talk a little bit about Bermuda either later on in this video or in another video to explain some of the differences, because I think that is an important thing to note as well. But the point is that because it's wealthy, because there's a lot of money here, a lot of wealthy people, it tends to have fairly good infrastructure compared to many of the other places. It's extremely low crime. Actually, a bunch of the islands, for example, Bahamas, has quite a lot of crime on it. And that is not the case in Cayman. So that's really good. It means that the quality of life is pretty good. I do notice that there is a pretty high variety of different types of food and restaurants. So that's really a nice thing for people who are wanting to go. If you were to compare to, for example, Montenegro, which actually has quite a few more people in it, the variety of food in Montenegro is not very good. It tends to be heavily tilted towards kind of Yugoslavian, Serbo-Croatian, whatever you want to call it, Montenegrin cuisine. Whereas here, if you want pizza, you've got pizza. If you want Chinese, you've got Chinese. If you want Thai, if you want Indian, if you want sushi, if you want seafood, if you want steak, if you want, all these different things, they have them here. Obviously of varying degrees of quality, depending on what you're looking for. But that being said, it is pretty good in that regard. This partially is due to the large tourist population, but also due to the population of people here who are wealthy. And in addition to that, you tend to have a really strong ecosystem of people who you can meet. So I was talking to a good friend who purchased a place here, and he was mentioning that he was at a single family office event, which was the best event of its type that he's been to anywhere in the world. And he's lived in some pretty well-known places for that sort of thing. So, worth considering that side of it as well in terms of maybe the networking that you can get. It seems in my experience to be pretty easy to connect with people here, probably partially because it's a pretty small place, but it's still big enough that it has a bit of an ecosystem. 80,000 people, not too big, not too small. It's certainly not a place where you've got, Vegas-style nightlife or something like that. If you're looking for that, if you're looking for a really strong dating scene or something, probably not optimal for those things. You either have to fly out some places or fly people in who are you wanting to meet, etc. However you want to do those things. The ability to do banking here is better than most Caribbean islands, but still not good. So it is typically in Caribbean islands difficult to do banking, or the banks aren't good, or both. Here, probably Butterfield would be one of the better institutions. There's a variety of them, and it depends what niche you're in. So for example, fund bank is here. So if you're setting up a hedge fund, Cayman historically has probably the strongest fund industry. There are some exceptions to how this works. I'll do another video on setting up funds in the future, kind of explain some of the options. But I would say that the cost to quality ratio is very high. There's a strong service provider environment here. There's a lot of corporate fiduciaries, there's trustees. They famously had something that they introduced quite a number of years ago called star trusts. It was like an even more flexible regime for trusts than you already get with trusts. Essentially anything that you could put into an agreement, you could put into a trust. And that was pretty interesting. Because it's a zero tax place, there isn't necessarily a very strong network of tax treaties. And of course, like many of these types of places, if you're operating in, say, Portugal, then it's a blacklisted country. So from that standpoint, not so great, but it depends really where you are. Normally what happens is they have Cayman-based funds because it's a tax-neutral environment. Then the people who are investing in the fund don't need to worry about the jurisdiction of the trust's taxes. They only have to worry about their home country taxes. But for funds, they have really good banking options, and they make it quite simple and straightforward. So we like that about it as well. One of the things that I think is good here is that the season is pretty long. So again, if I'm looking at buying property, investing, etc., in some place like Montenegro in 2018, I was kind of advocating that as being a good place to buy due to the kind of base dynamics, and that's paid off really well. The problem there is you've got like a 4-month season. So it's really tough to kind of make that your main home, and it's tough to make it very appealing from an investment return standpoint, where you have to be kind of like careful in that regard. Whereas here, you have most of the year the season is available. Now granted, it is not necessarily as attractive during the summer, not because it's so insane here. I mean, it's the same temperature mostly, though more humid, but it's more because, look, it's just good to be in North America at the time. So why would you go and venture to some place like Cayman, right? That's just the way that it goes. The part that relates to this, I think, is also that the time zone is very appealing for a lot of people. So a lot of people who are immigrating from Canada, the US, places like that, are looking for something that is on the US-Canadian time zone because of where their clients are, where their suppliers are, where their team are, things like this. Like time zones do matter in terms of ease of doing business, etc. And so here having a North American time zone, you're on Eastern time, that works out pretty well for a bunch of people. So I like that. It is a place that I notice, so I've mentioned in some previous videos, because I deal every day with people who are moving to different parts of the world, I ask myself, where do people stay? Because if people move there, for example, Panama, a lot of people move there, but they don't stay in Panama. They tend to leave. Similar with Malta. On paper, these places are good, but in practice, obviously not. And I view where people stay as sort of a giant data aggregation and compression algorithm where you can't necessarily nail down exactly what it is because it encompasses this whole host of data. Interestingly, Cayman is someplace that actually people do stay. I had dinner with somebody yesterday who's been here mostly since 2002, who's gone for a few years and then came back. And I run into a bunch of people who are like that. They've moved here and they stay or they come back and they really like it. So I think it's probably worth considering from that standpoint as a place to move, have a base that many people may not normally look at. Now, along with that, I personally think it's a very interesting place to invest in real estate. And the reason is, I look at, as we kind of have this changing world, I talk about what I call the Great Migration and sort of how the global population will shift and the like longer term trends in terms of taxation and the rising wealth inequality. And you're like, okay, over time, this means that probably wealthy people will move to an increasingly small number of places. And you can have places like UAE, right? Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Ras Al Khaimah, etc. But the issue is it's really easy to add supply in those markets. So it doesn't have a naturally long-term accretive effect on real estate prices. By contrast, these small islands, it's typically very difficult to add supply. There's a lack of skilled talent in terms of builders. There's just a lack of land in general. And so I'm very bullish on investing in these sorts of areas. We started looking, I guess it was like mid last year, at some of these regions, Bahamas, Aruba, Cayman, Bermuda, etc., to see what kind of opportunities were available. And I think it's quite interesting in that regard as sort of a long-term play. So anyway, if you're interested, again, I'll do some other videos on how you get residency here, how that works, a little bit in terms of the timelines for setting up. It is a more expensive place to live. It's definitely not a cheap island. And so, you know, if you're saying, okay, well, I'm making $100,000 a year and I'm going to move and benefit from the lower taxes, you'll probably pay the lifestyle tax, and that's probably going to counterbalance it. They have their own currency here. It's the Cayman dollar. It's more expensive than the US dollar, so it's pegged at 80 US dollar. And so if you have like 5,000 or say 4,000 Caymanian, that's equal to 5,000 American. So it just kind of gives you some idea. So it is expensive here. However, it's not like that expensive. It's not Monaco expensive in terms of real estate, etc. And I think the quality of life is good, and the fact that people can fly easily to North American destinations with direct flights is really appealing. It's very close, about an hour and a half to Miami, I think about 5 hours to Toronto. And so, yeah, definitely worth checking out, definitely worth considering. I would recommend people come in here and visit, see how it is. It's obviously not for everybody. I always say there is no one size fits all. And so if you'd like to check out other places, you can check out kind of some of the other videos we have here. And I will look forward to seeing you on the next video.